Okay, so this is where we left off last time. We all have something looking similar to this. One thing that we need to take a look at is, in order to get the correct topology around the wheel wells, we need to do something different. This works to an extent, but we want it to be better. Even in smooth mode, it still doesn't get that right arch. And especially for a car or anything engineered with some type of circle, you want to start with, or some type of cylindrical shape, you want to start with a cylinder. And the way we can do this is create a cylinder, rotate it just on the correct axes, drag it into place, and scale it down. Zoom in. One thing we can do with having these other objects in our way is creating layers. I already have the body mesh layer on a layer, and in order to add one, I'm going to add the fender to a layer, or both of them for the time being. I'm going to go to Layer, Create Layer from Selected. So I selected my objects, and I'm going to create layer from selected. I'm going to call this Fenders Mesh Layer. Save. Okay, so now I'm going to scale this into size. I'm going to hide that layer for the time being. I'm going to just line it up to a point where I need it. And then in my attribute editor, change it to, let's say, 12. What I'm going to do from here is simply adjust a couple of the vertices to match my reference a little bit more closely. The next thing I'll do is I'll delete the faces I don't need. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude these edges slightly. Extrude, and I'm going to press R, and I'm going to scale them out. Now it extrudes awkwardly, so one of the things I need to do is I need these to be flat, and in my front view, if I press W for my move tool, I can move it so it almost matches, but if I hold V, V will snap to vertices, and it'll snap just right along that edge right there. Same thing here. It'll snap directly to it. Another thing we need, if you notice, is that the outside of the vehicle will actually be black. That means your normals are reversed, and we haven't really touched on normals yet, but they we need to make them reversed. So as you can tell by default, gray is where the normals are correct. That means that this side will be textured where the other side will not. And in this case, what we need to do is under Mesh Display, Reverse. And now we get the reverse. Other things we can do, we can hold Shift and hold right click while our fender is selected and go to Soften Edge. And that should help a little bit on this interior part. Here I could, just for the time being, harden that edge. Now, from this point on, what I can do is I can line these up just ever so slightly better. matching my reference. Okay, and you'll see that the whole thing becomes rounded, especially on this outer edge. And this is how you get the correct topology for any object with this similar type of shape that needs to be cut into, like so. So here, I need to match this a little bit more closely. And from this point, I can re-show my fenders. I'm going to delete this one for the time being, and then here I'm going to delete some of these faces that I don't want. So something like this for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up a little bit better. Some other useful tools, it would help right about now if I had an extra edge loop here. So using this knife tool, it's like the shape of a knife. If I press that, it's called the multi-cut tool, and then I hold control over an edge, you'll see I get that nice edge loop, and I'll create one more edge loop there. And this is a place where I like to put on shading, wireframe on shaded, so I can match my topology a little bit better. I'm going to do the same thing and get rid of some of this extra geometry, which I'm not going to need for the time being. And I can hide my body mesh layer to make it a little bit more easier. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to match these objects up a little bit better. In this case, I created that edge loop simply so I could give myself a little bit more extra room on the geometry of the fender. And now I'm going to combine these objects. I'm going to select this object and select this object, and under Mesh, Combine, now they're the same object. Now what I can do is I'm going to select my vertice and I'm going to just snap these into place. And it looks like I'm going to need extra topology, but I can start with a couple of these here. And this is going to not be easy at first for you guys. So what I could do is, not exactly sure yet, but it may be something. And almost. So to make it a little bit better, what I'll do is, using my multi-cut tool, I'll hold control, and I'm going to hold control here as well, and that'll give me the extra geometry I need to make this a little bit more clean cut and nicer to create. I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to connect that one, and then I'm just going to connect this one, and then I'm going to connect just this one, and then I'm going to connect just this one. And the next thing I have to do is something called merge vertices, because if I hit 3, smooth mode is always a great way to double check your topology. You'll notice that they aren't connected, so I need to connect these manually. And the way you do that is you'll highlight, do a click and drag over these vertices, hold shift and right click, merge vertices, merge vertices. Do the same thing here, and now when I hit 3 up, check my settings, always merge 2 vertices. I'm going to do a 0.1, Do the same thing here, and here, and here, 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 and here. Now I can tell that they are connected, as you can see. Next thing I can do for another little modeling tip is select this entire hole, hold Shift, right click, and do a fill hole. Same thing here. Shift, right click, fill hole. And here I could actually maybe do the same thing, but then I have to use my knife tool and go back in and connect my edges, my vertices, to vertices to create that correct topology. So I'm going to need one more here, and the way I'll do this one is actually I could create a new edge loop in here using that knife tool, but in this case I'm just going to delete that one. I'm going to do the same thing on this side because I want to keep my quads. Fill hole, use my knife tool, go ahead and start connecting these edges. I'm just clicking and dragging along these lines, and now I get this correct round shape with the correct topology. Now you'll see when I hit the smooth mode, it matches my shape much better. One thing, because I got rid of the edge that was located right here, I need to go ahead and sort of just adjust the top of this so it matches a little bit better. And this will be difficult at first, but you'll notice that you'll start to get a much cleaner edge loop. Okay, and much cleaner topology. So there's that. The other thing I can do is I can go ahead and the rear edge loop and go ahead and do the same exact thing. But I'll let you guys do that one on your own. I showed you how to do the one. Now, one thing I can show you is okay. I'm going to add this fender to this selection. One thing I can do is I can use that same technique around this light, because our light is actually going to be a sphere something like that, and then go to your side view and drag it out. And then if I turn on my fender again, what I can do here on this fender is I can use that same technique. I'm going to create a layer for this. I'm going to call this head light mesh layer. Save. I'm going to hide this layer, and I'm going to hide this one. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact thing. In this case, I'll change this to 8. See how that works out, and then I'll put it here and get approximately that size. A couple things I'm not going to need right off the bat. I can tell I won't need any of these faces. or these ones. And I'm going to select the outer edge of these and run an extrude, scale them out slightly, and then I'm going to take these faces and I'm going to extrude these in to create the socket for the light. Hit 3, there we go. So, just double checking. So now I'll turn on my fenders, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more edge loop using my scissor tool here, holding Control, and that's to match the topology of that cylinder that I'm going to combine in the same exact way. Just trying to make sure that I've got it pretty well lined up. There we go. And I'm going to delete these faces and combine these objects, mesh, combine, and I'm going to do the same exact technique as earlier. And I'm going to snap these into place. And then I'm going to merge vertices. Hold Shift, hold right click, merge vertices, merge vertices. And then I'll hit 3 just to make sure that it's all merged, and now I've got that shape. I'll turn on my headlight, and one thing you'll notice is that it doesn't fit as well as it does in the reference. Add selected object. So it's a real tight fit there. So one of the other little modeling tip I can show you is going into edge mode, selecting this edge and running a Bevel Edge. Hit the settings box, this should be good. And then I go ahead and hit apply. It's got 2 segments and a small width. And you'll notice I get a much harder edge around that. And now if I turn on my headlight, it fits a little bit better. There we go. And if I turn shading, wireframe unshaded, you'll see I start to get that look. Now, switching to my front view, you'll see that just the fender alone, it fits pretty well to the original reference. So those are some modeling tips. And then to create something like this tire, we'll just, one last thing, we'll create a cylinder, rotate this at 90 degrees, go ahead and drag this into place, bring this to be its correct size. Here, scale it to fit approximately and move it into place. And what we can do here is select these faces, and this is nothing that we haven't done already. This is just a basic extrude and scale. Run an extrude, press R, scale in. Notice how I scaled it to fit that just right. Now I'm going to scale one more time, drag in, scale again, fit right there, scale one more time, something like that. I'm going to soften edges just to see, run a smooth. Doesn't have that same hard edge as we mentioned because we didn't bevel any of the edges, so that's a nice way to get that hard edge, but we have all the topology we need right now to match it. So a couple things you can do using that technique we just followed is I'm going to just do the outsides first, so just this outer edge and this outer edge, and run a bevel edge and bring that up slightly, and just trying to get a little bit more rounder on that edge, and that's good. So your numbers may be different than mine, but you just have to test it. This one I'm going to want to be slightly smaller. That should be okay. I'm going to do the same thing on this edge, same thing on this edge, and same thing on this edge. And now, when I hit 3, I get that closer looking look to the reference, and I've got the start of this car. So with wireframe on shaded mode, this is how the topology should start to look, something similar to this. Doesn't need to be exactly like this, but similar. So now I've got my tire in there, I've got my fender, and I've got the start of the body. So the very last thing we can do once you could do this when you do a duplicate special, but for now it could be the last thing you do. You just work on one and then duplicate it. So I've showed you how to do the duplicate special. Edit, duplicate special, make sure it's an instance, and then hit apply. And then if you hadn't already done this, make sure that your pivot point is in the center. So when I select this one, you'll see that my pivot point's directly in the center. If it weren't, it wouldn't have flipped over like that. So with this, hold D, hold X. D is to adjust your pivot point. So now you'll see if I were to rotate it, it'll rotate around that point. Holding D and X, X snaps to the grid. At least it should. And now, in your channel box, you need to make sure you freeze those out or zero those out. So modify, freeze transformations, and Command D. Command D is just duplicate. Command Shift D is duplicate special, and hit -1. And now I've got the start of my car. Do the same thing with the tire. Modify, freeze transformations, scale -1, and now you start to get the car. And one last little trick, you can duplicate these as well and bring these to the back, and then you've got the start of your vehicle. It's almost there, it's almost done. So that's all there is to that as of right now. Yeah, hope this was helpful.